The Deadly Dungeon. We're on Chapter 3. The kids stared at Wallace in silence. She winked at them. Don't worry, that's just his way of saying hello. Shall we go down? The kids glanced at each other, then followed Wallace down the wooden stairs. At the bottom, they found a small sandy beach. Dink and Josh set the basket in the shade of some boulders while Wallace and Ruth Rose spread the blanket. Look, a cave, Josh said, pointing at a tunnel at the bottom of the cliff. The sea snaked into the dark hole, making a narrow river. How far does it go in? Josh asked, peering into the black space. I don't know, Wallace said. Walker told me that it's full of bats. They picnic on chicken sandwiches, apples, chocolate chip cookies, and cold lemonade. Wallace pointed down the shoreline. Walker's house is beyond those trees. Where is he? Asked Dink. Out on his boat, Wallace said, waving a cookie at the ocean. His lobster pots are scattered over about a half-mile of very deep water. How does he find them? Josh asked. Wallace wiped her fingers on a paper napkin. Well, he has a good compass aboard. Lady Luck, that's his boat, and he knows the water. After their picnic, Wallace put everything back into the basket. Ready for a walk? They hiked along the rocky beach. Ruth Rose poked into tide pools and picked up shells. Josh hung his sneakers around his neck and waded along the shore. Better watch out for lobsters, Dink teased. They like smelly toes. Josh grinned and splashed Dink. Rounding a curve in the shoreline, Wallace pointed. There's Walker's place. It was a gray cottage with a red roof surrounded by dune grass and sand. Just then they heard a shout. Dink looked around and saw someone waving from the end of a dock. Wallace waved back. Kids, come and meet our friend, Ripley Pierce. They walked out on the dock toward a long green boat tied at the end. The boat's brass and wood trim gleamed in the sunlight. A man stood next to the boat holding a dripping sponge. He had dark, slicked-back hair and blue eyes. Hi, Rip, Wallace said. Meet Dink Duncan, Josh Pinto, and Ruth Rose Hathaway. The man smiled and stuck out a hand. He had dazzling white teeth and a deep tan. You're fans of this lady's books, right? I've got all of them, Dink announced. I met these three in Connecticut, Wallace explained. They're spending a week up at the castle. Why don't you come for supper with us tonight? I like your boat, Ruth Rose said. It's so shiny and clean. Rip flashed her a grin. Thank you very much, little lady. I'll see you tonight at dinner. Then he looked at Josh. Want to untie me? He asked, pointing to a rope tied to the end of the dock. Josh untied the rope and handed it to Rip. Nice meeting you, kids, he said, stepping aboard his boat. He started the engine and the boat pulled smoothly away from the dock. Dink watched the boat cut through the water. Maybe I won't be a writer when I grow up. Maybe I'll get a lobster boat. Wallace grinned at Dink. Better stick to riding, Dink. Lobsters are getting scarce in Maine. I can't wait to go out on Walker's boat, Ruth Rose said. My brother's boat is nothing like Rip's, Wallace said. She shook her head. I don't know how Rip keeps his so clean. Walker's boat looks and smells like a lobster boat. They walked back toward their picnic spot. Josh kicked water on Ruth Rose, and she chased him down the beach, yelling all the way. Dink walked quietly along with Wallace. Overhead, a seagull cried out. Dink looked up at Wallace. Do you really think that scream we heard was the ghost of Emery Scott? Wallace laughed. All I know is I've been hearing those screams since I moved in. The first time I searched the castle, but I never found a thing. Dink shivered. Do you hear the noises a lot? He asked. Wallace shrugged. Sometimes weeks go by and there's not a peep. Then I'll hear them for a few days in a row. Wallace smiled down at Dink. To tell you the truth, Dink, this is one mystery that's got me stumped. If those screams aren't the ghost of Emery Scott, I don't know what they are. Chapter 4. At the top of the cliff, Wallace took the picnic things. I need to spend some time working on my new book, she said. Why don't you guys go exploring? Emery Scott built a playhouse for his kids in those trees. You might want to check it out. She opened the side door. Oh, I almost forgot, she said with twinkling eyes. Some people think his ghost hangs around there, looking for his children, so keep your eyes open. With that, she went inside. The kids found a path through the trees. As they walked, Dink told Josh and Ruth Rose what Wallace had said on the beach. So it is a ghost? Josh said. Creepy. No way, Ruth Rose said. I don't believe in ghosts. It must be an animal trapped somewhere in the castle. I don't know, Dink said. Wallace told me she searched the whole place. Besides, said Josh, what kind of animal makes a spooky scream like that? Just then, the kids reached the playhouse. The outside of the small wooden building had been painted to look like Wallace's castle. A kid-sized drawbridge crossed a shallow moat to the front door. "Excellent," said Josh. "Let's go inside," Ruth Rose cried, running to the door. She tugged on the handle and the door opened with a soft whoosh. Ruth Rose curtsied. "Enter, my loyal knights." "His Highness King Dink goes first," Dink said, nudging ahead of Josh. They crowded into the room. Everything was covered with a layer of dust. Dim light shone through two small windows covered with cobwebs. Josh rubbed his arms. "Boy, this place is cold," he said. "Looks like no one's been in here for years," Ruth Rose said. A round table and two little chairs stood in the middle of the room on a dusty, worn rug. A shelf held a miniature set of blue dishes. Under the shelf, a lonely-looking teddy bear sat on an old sofa. "This place creeps me out," Josh said. "Look," Dink said. "Footprints on the rug." He stepped into one of them. "Whoever made these sure has big feet." "Do ghosts leave footprints?" Josh asked. "Maybe it's Walker," Ruth Rose suggested. "They're too big to be Wallace's." "But why would Walker come here?" Dink wondered out loud. "Can we go?" Josh pleaded. "I just saw a monster spider and he was looking back at me." "Okay, but let's come back," Ruth Rose said. "I want to clean this place. It's sad to see it all dusty like this." Ruth Rose pulled the door shut behind them. As they crossed the drawbridge, Dink noticed something in the moat. He jumped down and picked up a bright green feather. "Hey guys, look! It's like the one that was stuck to Josh's sneaker." Ruth Rose held the feather up to the sun. "What's it from?" Josh examined the feather. "The only bird I know with this kind of feather is a parrot," he said, "but parrots don't live in Maine." Dink took the feather back from Josh, then put it in his pocket. "Okay, we've explored the playhouse," Josh said. "Now you guys have to do what I want." Dink grinned at his friend. "You mean eat?" "No, I want to check out that cave down on the beach." "Wait a minute," Dink said. "You were creeped out by a playhouse, but you want to explore the cave." "Caves are cool," Josh said. "Come on, you guys." The kids headed past the castle through the gate and down the cliff. They stood looking at the small river flowing out of the cave. "I wonder how deep it is," Dink said. "There's one way to find out," Josh said. He stepped in the water and began wading into the cave. The water reached just above his ankles. "Come on, you guys," he called over his shoulder. Dink and Ruth Rose followed him. The cave grew darker until the sunlight disappeared. The air was cold and damp, and the black walls felt slimy. "Josh, this water is freezing," Ruth Rose said. Her voice sounded hollow. "I hate it in here. Can we go back?" "The water's getting deeper, too," Dink said. "And I can't even see you guys." "Shh," Josh said. "I heard something." "Josh, don't try to scare us," Ruth Rose said suddenly. "I'm all ready." Suddenly, a scream echoed through the cave. "Run!" Ruth Rose yelled. Over their heads, hundreds of black bats streaked for daylight.